This Week in Startups is brought to you by Masterworks, the first company allowing investors exposure into the blue chip artwork asset class. This Week in Startups listeners can skip the waitlist today by going to i.masterworks.io/twist. LinkedIn. A business is only as strong as its people, and every hire matters. Go to linkedin.com/twist and get a $50 credit towards your first job post. And Monday.com. Manage all your core business activities in one place. Start your 14-day free trial by going to monday.com/twist.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. My guest today is Laura Huang, and she was on the pod back in June of 2017, episode 739. And she was at the time a professor at Wharton.
That's right.
And you were doing research on angel investors, and somehow we got put in touch. Where I reached out to you, I wasn't sure.
You found me. You somehow...
Somebody was tweeting about you, I think. And then
so,
I was like, hey, tell me about your research. Because if it's about angel investing, I want to know. And now your new book is out, Edge, Turning Adversity into Advantage. And you can go order that right now. If you're listening to me and you're a fan of the pod, go and order the book. Anytime anybody's on the podcast, if you are a true fan, you order and buy the book to show support for the authors who come on the podcast. So we get even better authors on over time. And that's been happening. Great authors come on the pod all the time. So since that time, you left and you went to Harvard.
I did.
So now you're at HBS teaching.
I am.
What are you teaching?
So I'm teaching leadership and entrepreneurship, two different classes. Leadership is a core required class, and entrepreneurship is an elective.
Got it.
Yep.
You're teaching leadership to these HBS maniac kids who are self-selecting for being like massively extroverted, take over the world, like unbelievably confident individuals.
I know, aren't
speaking.
they incredible? I mean, they are incredible.
It's a bit much sometimes. I'll be honest about the HBS kids.
They're phenomenal. I mean,
that's the problem is they're so phenomenal.
They're so good, and you think that they're not going to be humble and have humility, but they really do. They are humble? They are. They surprise me, and they're just so fun to teach. They really are. So shout out to all my students.
Shout out. I always find the HBS students are massively confident, but when they get into entrepreneurship, they get a little rattled.
Are you describing yourself here, Jason?
No. Listen, everybody knows I went to HBS twice, and both times they escorted me off the campus. Like I had like a one-day pass to speak at a conference or something. But the Stanford kids, I found maybe not as confident in that way, but a little bit more creative on the startup side. Is that fair to say when people look at the two programs, because they are competitive? Do they draw two different types of people?
I think they do draw two types of people to an extent, but the types of ideas. Well, I think people who look, if you want to be a real, like if you're passionate about something, you've got this idea and you're going to start this company. I don't know that you would necessarily initially go to either school, would you? I mean, I think the people who come to HBS and really fall in love with entrepreneurship and realize, hey, I've got all these skills, I've got all these assets, I can really do this. I mean, they've got all of these wonderful experiences, backgrounds that they then kind of flip into doing a startup. And it does, I think that increasingly we're seeing some really creative ideas.
Are the majority of folks going to HBS looking to start a company or looking to become senior leadership at established companies go into banking? What percentage do you think?
I think the larger percentage is probably the latter, that there's more that are looking to go into senior management positions, GM roles, that sort of thing. But over the course of their careers, some of them start out wanting that and doing that for a couple of years, realize that they want to start something on their own. And so we see that, 90% of people who end up starting a company are ones that have worked in some other industry first and then decide that they want to do that later on. So.
What percentage of the classes ballpark are non-American international students? Because I just spoke at Stanford where they did a case study on me, actually. And I think 2/3 were not from America. It was amazing the number of countries in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact percentage, but we have this, in each section, there's a flag day. And it's this amazing sort of night where all of the people will give a little presentation about the country that they're from or, their families. And the room is filled with different flags. So I would say like 50 or 60 different flags. So it's pretty,
Not national origin of American students, but international students who
I think both. I think both. So people some that were born in those countries and, so, yeah.
Any interesting countries? Like, is anybody from North Korea, Russia,
Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijan?
I just wanted to be able to say that. I
Chinese
practiced
students?
it. Yeah, we've got a lot of Chinese students.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
that's got to be really interesting to have Chinese students at HBS.
Yeah, we've got students.
Given the climate.
Yeah, for
between
sure.
The U.S. and China is so weird.
Weird. Yeah.
Huawei,
yeah,
intellectual property theft, authoritarianism, the NBA, criticism of China. It's a very we're so dependent on each other, yet so different.
Yeah, but we've got so many different cultures and, at the same time that we've got Palestinians and Israelis and, there's all sorts of, but I mean, it works. It works.
Yeah.
There's really this climate where it's, you're in these sections together and you're together all day and you're really learning from each other. So it somehow works.
Huh.
You got to come visit.
Yeah, I mean, I go out.
Come visit.
I get invited out every couple of years, and I do a talk or I interview somebody. Last time I was there, I interviewed Chamath on stage, and about 5 minutes in, he lost like 5 or 6 people who just left in disgust because he was like, "Listen, you guys are wasting your money here," and blah 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 blah. And he just like went crazy. And he's like, "You guys should put the $250 into whatever." Let's talk about your book. You decided to write this book, Edge: Turning Adversity into Advantage.
Yep.
There's a little bit about your story in here and a little bit about your research. What made you want to write this book right now?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had been like percolating on this idea for a while. The research that I've been doing for over a decade was around, inequality and disadvantage and people who are underestimated in the startup world and in the workplace. And I kept coming back to this thing where people would say to me, I put in all this hard work. I put in so much effort and hard work. And sometimes that hard work just doesn't speak for itself. And we all come to this sort of realization at some point in our lives that we put in this hard work and for whatever reason, it doesn't speak for itself and it leaves us frustrated because we realize—
What does it mean it doesn't speak for itself?
Well, things
you
are
don't get
driven,
recognition for it. You don't get raises. You don't get promotions just for doing the work.
All of those things, but sort of the outcomes, the success that you're sort of expecting, either don't come to you, or that you're hitting the same walls over and over and over again.
Got it.
Or you take two people who work equally as hard, and one works perhaps even harder, but that the rewards go to that, to that other person. And so it was really around recognizing that perceptions and signals and cues are driving so much of these decisions. And so when people would ask me about my research and they would say, what can we do to level the playing field? What can we do to create, if we know that there are certain people who naturally have advantages and we're not one of those people, what can we do? And so this book is really, how do you flip the obstacles, the adversity, the stereotypes that people have against you? How do you flip those things in your favor so that you can gain and create your own edge?
And when you refer to other people have advantages that we don't have.
Yeah.
Specifically, you're talking about cis white guys born in America versus women and people of color not having those advantages. Am I correct?
Well, the typical cast of characters that we think about is absolutely right. Like gender, race, ethnicity, class, religion, sexual orientation. Those are typically the kind of things that we think about when we speak about disadvantage. But what I talk about in my book is really everyone has something. It's not just about those kind of things. You can take anybody and you walk into a room. People have perceptions. They're making judgments about you. They're making attributions about you. So there's lots of examples that I talk about. I mean, Ronan Farrow said to me, a couple years ago that every time people are perceiving him, he's this cis white guy that has he's the son of Mia Farrow, but every time he walks into a room, people are thinking, he got access to this person because of who he is, and he doesn't deserve the Pulitzer Prize because he just got it because of who he is. Everyone has something.
Yeah.
And so recognizing how others see you and recognizing those perceptions, there's so much power in that because that's what allows you to then flip that in your favor to show people who you authentically are when they might be misperceiving you. And
is there a danger in people focusing in on that which makes them different? This is like the cis white guy argument.
Right.
Like, why are you guys so obsessed with this as opposed to the outcomes and the work? So this isn't my position, but this is the position that you probably hear from people, which is, are you guys like just too obsessed with the differences of being a woman of color who's gay? And maybe that is because you have that in your mind, because you're in that victim mentality, the oppression Olympics, I guess people call it, or the intersectionality kind of everything is looked through the lens of, gender. Everything's looked at. It's not always the case that other people are looking through it. Isn't that the case too?
Well, I mean, look, structurally, we know that there are disadvantages, that certain classes of people or certain traits lead to disadvantages. There's less gender parity, all those sorts of things. But that's not what it's really about. I mean, we've been talking about this for a really, really long time.
Like decades.
And structurally, things, we are trying to make changes, but sometimes either those changes are too slow, or maybe they're changing, but they're not changing in the ways that we intended, or they're not changing, all of these different things. And so the perspective that I sort of take is that, number one, everyone has something. And number two, we can't sit around and wait for the systems to change or expect them to change in certain ways, that we have to, from the inside, behaviorally, also be able to empower ourselves. So how do we then empower ourselves within what may be an imperfect system to show people what we, how we enrich or provide value or whatever the case may be, so that we can have these deeper, richer relationships with other people.
And I thought that was a pretty controversial moment in the book. And I'm curious of the feedback you got from people who feel maybe that they're oppressed, or maybe there's bias against them. When you say, hey, suck it up, you can fight the good fight for the cause, but the reality is you're entering a system and I want you to individually win. So let's talk about a strategy for you to win, as opposed to one where you're going to lose because you want to fight the bigger battle. Let's talk about that issue and the reaction you got to that part of the book when we get back on This Week in Startups. Masterworks.io is the first company to allow any type of investor, whether you're retail or accredited, to gain exposure to the blue chip artwork asset class. I met with the founders. This is a brilliant idea. In a way, it's similar to what I do with the syndicate, where I syndicate my angel deals. Imagine syndicating a piece of artwork. Now you can trade individual shares in masterpieces by the all-time greats with the Masterworks art trading platform, including pieces by Basquiat, you may have heard of him, Picasso, and Warhol. These blue chips regularly sell for tens of millions and typically appreciate 8% to 30% annually. How does it work? Well, it's very simple. Masterworks buys a painting and sells shares to investors. How brilliant is that? When the painting sells, you receive your portion of the proceeds, or you can sell your shares on the platform for a gain. Bottom line, you can diversify your portfolio by investing in an asset class that's not correlated with the stock market. There are 1,000 people on the wait list, but fear not. Twist listeners can skip to the front of the line as usual. I want you to go to i.masterworks.io to skip their 1,000-person waiting list. That's right. Go right to the front of the line. They're very busy over there by going to i.masterworks.io. And you're going to skip that 1,000-person wait list right now. It's a really brilliant idea. I love this idea. And I think it's going to be huge, actually. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. All right, Laura Huang is back on the pod. She's Laura, Huangla on the Twitter. But she's now in Boston teaching at Harvard Business School. And her new book, Edge, Turning Adversity into Advantage. So I actually literally wrote in my notes, when I was listening to the book. Thanks for getting me the early audio.
Sure.
You read it yourself?
I did.
Did they fight you on that, by the way? Did they ask you to use a professional person?
No, they didn't actually give me a choice. They said, "Here's the studio, show up." And I actually was like, I don't know how to do this. Don't you want to get a professional to do this? But they said, no. We listened to you. We've listened to your This Week in Startups, and we think you can do this. So show up at this. But it was agonizing.
How many days? 4?
4 full days.
Yeah, I was about to say 4.
8 hours. Had to repeat things 4 or 5 times. I didn't know that I dropped T's. Things like instead of saying important, I say important.
Yeah.
And instead of I say Wharton instead of Wharton.
Yeah. And then the great part is they're on the other side of the glass. I'm like, okay, stop. Go ahead and let's just say Wharton.
That's right.
One more time. And you're like, that's what I said. And they're like, okay, let's pick it up from Wharton. And they don't want to tell you what you did wrong. They just want to repeat it to you because they're so...
They do.
They don't want to offend you.
They do.
And your voice is raw and you're in a tiny room with bad air.
Yes.
And it's so quiet that you can hear your stomach grumbling.
And they don't give you comfortable chairs because apparently the comfortable chairs make noise.
Yes.
So you have to sit on a hard wooden stool.
Yeah.
And then I constantly got, can you do that again, but with a little bit more emotion?
So they didn't tell you like, you know what, Laura, that's a little too much emotion. You sound a bit hysterical, lady.
Is that what you got?
That's what I got. Jake, turn it down. You sound hysterical.
I was like, I'm already the bubbliest professor that there is. What kind of emotion do you want from me? But
if you want to hear something hysterical, type in William Shatner ad read tape, and literally somebody tried to tell William Shatner to give it a little more energy. And for an audio engineer to give William Shatner any kind of note, we call it a note in the business, is stopping, a play to give an Emmy Award winning actor, a note.
Yeah.
He was so offended that the response is just so timeless.
I think
and classic.
The plays are the Tonys, though. I think Emmy is
Tonys.
television.
You're right. I'm working on my EGOT.
Yes.
I got to get my Emmy first.
That's right.
But do people take it the wrong way when you're like, hey, let's separate out your success from the systematic problems in the world, which are irrefutable?
Yeah.
Obviously getting better. Mm-hmm. You would agree with both those statements? Mm-hmm. Well, you're kind of halfway.
Yeah.
I mean, I just speaking for my industry, technology and investing, the number of female investors of color, it is changed more in the last 2 years than the previous 20.
Yeah.
So do we get to count that as progress, or is
it's
not enough? And
we do, but there's so many things there that you're just even in that statement, right? I mean, I think. Okay, the first is that it actually has been really well received. People kind of thinking about, yes, I have this power. I'm empowered both. There's the outside doing things for the inside and the inside doing things from the outside. And what I mean by that is structurally things are changing for people who are operating from within the structure.
Right.
But behaviorally, we're helping to change the structure, and that there's this power that comes with being able to flip the biases that other people have against you and being able to use that in your favor, taking those underestimated strengths and making them something that other people see are actually strengths. But structurally, the other thing is that, I find in my research, for example, that in many instances, both male investors and female investors are equally likely to bias against female entrepreneurs.
Why?
So, for example, I find in some of my research that that female entrepreneurs are more likely to get asked questions about risk and questions about competition, whereas male founders are more likely to get asked questions about the opportunity and how big you could take this and your vision.
Yeah, you studied a lot of the conferences out there and competitions, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely, like TechCrunch and lots of different, and found that. And so the finding in that particular research project was that both male and female investors are just as likely to be asking women entrepreneurs, those questions that are called prevention-focused questions.
Right. So when we think about that, did you further correlate that to the businesses that women create? So did it have to do with, because it's a correlation.
Yeah.
But what's the cause?
So we did it in a bunch of different ways. We did look at industries, right? So are there certain industries where you're going to ask certain types of questions, right? Naturally.
Right. If it was a B2C and there's tons of competition, and it turned out that the women selected for those conferences had more consumer products, because when I ran those kind of conferences, we always picked consumer stuff for the stage because it's more entertaining than hard tech enterprise stuff. So I was wondering if there is... Peel it back a little bit.
And you're also more likely to ask more of those specific questions when it's a consumer. But no, actually, what we did was we actually controlled for the industry, so experimentally as well as in the field. And so, so what that suggests is that yes, it's going to help. It can't hurt to have more women investors and have more women mentors. But if both male and females are biasing and doing this sort of thing, it's not just the male investors. And so structurally, it's not going to hurt, but we also have to within be able to change things from within. But the last piece of that is also that, a lot of people who have commented on this is it the system versus is it what's happening inside, is that it feels almost strategic or manipulative in a way. And that's why a lot of people don't do that. They don't want to kind of guide these perceptions because they say, oh, it's about managing impressions, and it feels like we know that person who like kisses up to the boss, and we don't want to be that person. But this is actually the opposite of that. When you're able to manage and guide people's perceptions of who you authentically are, it's the opposite of being strategic, because people are going to have perceptions of you whether or not you help them and guide them to who you authentically are or not.
You're sort of clarifying more than manipulating. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's totally clarifying, and it's also bringing your own values and your own vulnerabilities and your own assets to the table so that you can have...
On a metacognition level, if the VCs are asking women a question in a public forum or in general with something else on their mind, so they ask them the competition question for a reason other than they perceive women to be not as good on the competitive front. Like that would be the surface interpretation of this, is they're asking women about competition because they feel women are less aggressive or less able to compete. Is that what you inferred from it when you first read it?
There's lots of different perceptions that can be driving this. I think the important piece of it, especially for entrepreneurs, is that, and it's not just limited to gender, by the way, right? People with tech backgrounds, people who may be getting different questions as well, certain industries, all of those things that you're alluding to. I mean, what happens though is that when you get a question, so if I were to ask you a question that's much more around the risk and the competition and the drawbacks of something, you're more likely to respond in turn by giving me an answer that focuses on competition and the risk and that sort of thing.
Sure, because I would have listened to your question and directly taken head on.
That's right.
Which is what I train my entrepreneurs to do.
That's right. But if I ask you a question that's much more what we call promotion focused, things about the opportunity and how big you can take this, you're going to be answering in turn by answering with a vision oriented, large scale sort of thing. And who do you invest in? You invest in the opportunity that can go bigger and better. So
in one case, you're framing everything for, how is this ever going to win? Like, God, there's so many competitors. And the other one, you're like, kind of assuming it's going to win. And tell me how big can this get?
That's right. Where else could you take this? What other markets? What other customer segments?
Fascinating.
But this is where that kind of turning your adversity into advantage.
Yeah, how do you do that in this circumstance?
In this circumstance, as soon as you recognize, for example, that you're getting a prevention-focused question, you answer the question quickly. You still answer it, but then you turn it into a promotion-oriented response. So you say something, and you say, there are a lot of competitors here, but our product is superior to them in these ways. And so that allows us to go into these other markets and pursue these other opportunities. And then what I find in some of my research is that you're able to not only level the playing field, but you even increase your chances above and beyond those other folks. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, because now you've addressed that competition piece and that risk piece, but you've now flipped it. And now not only do they see you as able to, tackle those things, but now you've put something in their head, a new perception, a new attribution.
Inception.
That's Inception.
No, it's like Inception.
It is.
I teach my founders sometimes to do Inception with investors, which is you would answer the question and say, we have three main competitors. One of them is people just using Excel or Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
One is a direct competitor, and one is outsourcing. And the direct competitor, they've been in markets, legacy software, so they're really not that competitive. But, it's really on our roadmap, the second phase and the third phase that's more important. But it's a great question. And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, there's a second phase and a third phase?
Yeah.
So you gave them a hint that there's something else coming.
That's right.
And then they're like, oh. So you're kind of implanting something there.
That's similar. It reminds me a lot of what I talk about in terms of delight, right? In terms of delighting your counterpart. And
let's expand on that concept when we get back from this quick break. You talk about delighting people and in a way kind of getting them intrigued, I guess would be a good word. Let's talk about delight and intrigue when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hiring great people is the way to grow your business. You know this. But how do you do that and run your business at the same time? Hiring is a huge time suck. It's the biggest time suck. We all know that. I have a perfect solution for you to get talent right now. It's called LinkedIn Jobs, and it makes it simple and easy. They screen candidates with all the hard and soft skills that you need so you can hire the right person right now. LinkedIn looks beyond the work skills. No, it's not just that. They also put your job in front of qualified candidates who match your business requirements perfectly. Things like collaboration, creativity, and adaptability. That's how LinkedIn makes sure your job post is seen by the people you want to hire, people with the skills, qualifications, and other interests that will help your business grow. And it's no wonder a person is hired every 8 seconds with LinkedIn. Here's an example, Takeoffs.io, one of my portfolio companies that we found when we were in Sydney and they moved to the United States. They are an AI-enabled building materials marketplace. So if you're building something, they use AI to say, hey, here's how much wood, here's how many bricks you need. You get the idea. Well, they were looking for an AI engineering lead, which is a tough role to hire for because they required a very unique skill set. They used LinkedIn Talent Solutions to find a qualified candidate. In fact, somebody with a PhD in computer vision so they could look at these floor plans and figure out what you need in terms of materials. You get the idea. Well, that person has now been with them for over a year, and they've rolled out several major projects, and they're really been a game changer for Takeoffs.io. Examples like this are why companies rated LinkedIn Jobs the #1 hiring platform for delivering quality hires. So here is your call to action. Find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. You can pay what you want, and you'll get the first $50, $50, for free. Just visit linkedin.com/twist. Again, that's linkedin.com/TWIST and get $50 off your first job post. Terms and conditions do apply because they're giving you a $50. All right, let's get back to this amazing episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest, Laura Huang, and she is back on the program. If you want to watch her first appearance, episode 739, back in June of 2017. When we left you, we're talking a little bit about delight. So what is the strategy of delighting people as it relates to the bias people have against women, people of color, LGBTQ?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing about being at a disadvantage or being underestimated is that you don't always have the opportunity to show how you enrich and provide value. That's the E of EDGE, by the way. Yeah. So the framework is about how to gain an edge, but it actually stands for EDGE. The E is enrich. And the problem is that we don't always have that opportunity to show how we, can provide value to somebody else or show what our strengths are. And sometimes it's because we don't belong to the right networks, or we're not in the right groups, or we just don't have the opportunity. And the D is for delight, which is when we're able to delight our counterpart or delight somebody else.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of being able to crack open that door, right, so that we can then show them how we enrich and provide value. And delight is it's a hard sort of emotion or a hard sort of thing to capture, but I always think about it in terms of or I try and have people kind of think about in terms of, think about the very first time that you were in an Uber. You may be the wrong person to ask, but think about the very first, or maybe you're the exact right person to ask. But the very first time you were in an Uber. So forget all the other stuff around the management team and whatever, okay?
The exceptional management team that built one of the fastest growing companies in the history of Silicon Valley.
Whatever. But
cheers to you. Management team.
But if you go...
Careful, that management team is responsible for 90% of my net worth.
Okay,
Take it easy, Laura.
No, but go back to that like emotion, right? That very first emotion that you had when you were in an Uber for the first time, right?
Yes.
And it's this feeling of, this is really interesting, but terrifying, right?
Yeah.
I'm in a stranger's car, and he or she just knows where to take me,
right?
And I'm not going to give him or her any money.
No.
And so you're sitting there and you're like, this is just, you get
Felt like the future.
You get this feeling of delight.
Yeah.
You get this feeling of like, and it's this feeling where it just makes you take pause for a second and think about something in a slightly different way, or consider something in a slightly more surprising or counterintuitive way.
Right.
When you're able to do that with somebody else, show them a side of you that they perhaps didn't consider or didn't notice, that's when they're going to pause and be like, oh, and want to ask you a question. And once they ask you the question, that's when you start that conversation and you're able to show them how you enrich and provide value.
Got it. How would that happen in a VC meeting? Like, it's one thing to talk about it like with a product. But, okay, you're a Black female founder who's a lesbian from Texas.
Yeah. How would you?
And you didn't go to Stanford or Harvard. And you're not a developer. You're a sales marketing executive.
Yeah.
Who now has a startup.
I mean.
And you got the meeting with a VC. How does that person delight them in the meeting?
I mean, the first step is kind of understanding that, like, all of those things that you just said, like, they see me as a Black woman from Texas who has this background. So what underlying perceptions are they making about me? Is it about my competence? Is it about how interpersonally skilled I am? About how well I'm able to interact on a team? Like, what are those underlying perceptions? And when you understand,
what do you think they are? Let's be candid. Let's talk about candidly what a white VC is.
I think it depends on who you are and who that other person is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is some degree of, are you able to execute on this? Is this an idea that has substance to it? Is this something that is more of a niche product that is not going to be, that because of your background, you're solving a pain point that's only going to be for Black women from Texas? Show me that it's going to be bigger or better or something. All of these sort of, I think those are the types of kind of things, but that's the opportunity as well, right? So what I found in a lot of my research when I've looked at, for example, people who are underestimated in those situations or disadvantaged, is once you recognize that, for example, the perception they have is that you're somehow not as interpersonally skilled, for example.
Yeah.
So you go in, and then once they start asking you questions, you attack and you actually redirect that very perception. So you give examples of, like, let me tell you about a time when I fought for resources for my team. Or let me tell you about a time when I closed this deal. And I didn't stop until that deal was signed. And you're giving them examples that then redirect the way that they see that perception. So you're anticipating the bias,
even putting aside the word bias, because that's loaded. Let's just say you anticipate
those perceptions,
the perceptions,
and those attributions that they're making about you.
That this is going to be a lifestyle business. You come in and say, you might be thinking, is this a lifestyle business? Maybe something that could make $5 million or $10 million a year. Let me explain to you how this is going to get to $1 billion in sales a year. Not $1 billion valuation for the company, but the path to $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah. The difference though is that you have to do this, and the power of sort of flipping adversity to your advantage, and the sort of strategies and tactics that I talk about in the book, is that you do this in a very benign way. You don't go and say, I know it's because I'm a woman that you think X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, that's going to go over great.
It's not going to go great because the other person's going to feel confronted. They're going to immediately say, no, it's not about, even if they are, right? And so you don't go in saying, like, I know you think it's a lifestyle business, or I know you think that because I'm a woman, or I know that you think because of, my race or ethnicity. But instead, you look beyond those sort of factors and you look at those underlying perceptions that they're making because of those ascribed, so
you're not
or
calling them out on it and
yes.
being like, okay, you racist, let me explain to you why your bias is wrong, which is basically 90% of Twitter.
Well,
this is why things have broken down on Twitter, I feel, when we talk about race on Twitter or gender on Twitter or even bias.
Yeah,
the conversation you and I are having right now about bias is so uncomfortable.
Are you uncomfortable? Am I making you uncomfortable?
I don't feel uncomfortable at all. Because I know my own heart. I would love to somehow
make you feel uncomfortable. You'll have to let me know the best way to do that.
I'm not sure that's worked for many people on Twitter. But it is the reason I like to talk about it so candidly on this podcast is I feel like forward progress is made through candid discussion.
Yes.
And it's a lost art today. And on Twitter, it never works because you have a small a window of, being able to explain yourself. But on podcasts, because it opens up when you talk for an hour, we can actually explore this.
Yeah.
Just the act of me saying, let's take an example of a female black lesbian from Texas. People are like, whoa, oh my God, where is this going? It just makes everybody uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you're saying, hey, there's no reason to make people more uncomfortable, but if you do anticipate that you're going to be perceived as a lifestyle business or maybe even less tech because you didn't go to MIT and you went to some business school and, you're a marketer, so they think, oh, there's no tech here.
Yeah.
You're saying cut them off at the pass, address that somehow in your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I think
there's a way to go about it.
Absolutely, and I think part of what you're saying also is that these conversations, we often don't have these conversations, and the best way to hone your ability to see how other people perceive you and to be able to, hone that intuition around that interaction is by having these types of conversations. And something that I teach in my leadership class to my students is one of the reasons that we don't do this is because we don't think enough about somebody's intent versus the impact of what they're sort of saying. I mean, who amongst us has not said something to someone else that we then, for whatever reason, didn't get a chance to, like we leave thinking, oh, I hope that person didn't think that I meant that because I did it, but it could have been interpreted. So I hope that they didn't think that I was thinking.
Well, certainly 100% of married couples have had this experience where what they've said and how it was interpreted were two wildly different
no way.
things.
I communicate perfectly with my husband.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
Right.
This is another thing that I think, if you're on Twitter like you and I are, or if you're involved in the open discourse of race, gender, bias, and especially in the tech industry, there's just no room for intent anymore. Yeah. And I always stop and say, okay, this person said something that was horrible. What was their intent? Because I did it myself.
Yeah.
I said one time, we were talking about black founders, just people of color in tech. And I said, one of the problems is, people have set this ridiculously high bar for who they will meet with. And that bar is typically $1 million, $2 million in revenue. And if you raise the bar that high, then people who are just starting out are not going to ever get a meeting and they're not going to ever get the feedback that you're doing. So if you're a VC, just lower the bar of who you'll meet with. And meet with everybody, or take 20% of your schedule and meet with people.
But let me guess, it's lower the bar piece.
The lower the bar thing triggered a bunch of people. They're like, what did you say? You're saying lower the bar for black people? And I was like, well, no, I said lower the bar for a meeting. But by that time, 50 people had run with it. And I specifically was referring to who you take a meeting with.
Well, I think there's
the quality of the company, the stage of the company.
No, I mean, I just
and
think
then I just deleted the tweet and restated it.
I just think that there's a lot of there's so many things that are now loaded or so. It reminds me of when I said at one point was like, it's very triggering. I said something along the lines of, if you don't have privilege, you can make your own privilege.
Whoa.
And
hold on a second. You're about to get canceled as your counsel. Saying
you can make your own privilege. You can make your own privilege. And if you take the loaded piece, privilege is really, we talk about unfair advantage all the time, right?
Edge.
Well, okay. Well,
unfair advantage is an edge. Is there a difference?
Yeah, but the unfair piece is what bothers people.
How you got the edge.
How you got that, what makes it unfair.
Got it.
And I think edge, what I really, sort of believe is that it's not an unfair thing. It's something that you have, but for whatever reason, people are not seeing it, or it's undervalued, or, it's an underpriced asset that once people understand, they're going to be like, whoa, this has huge beta.
How does one build their privilege? How does one manufacture their privilege?
Well, manufacture is also not a good word, Jason.
Okay, create.
Yeah, creates, find.
Manufacture could be perceived as falsely manufacturing because it's not real. Well, but I meant manufacturing as how does one build their privilege? curate their own privilege?
Yeah,
What's a good
and
word?
I mean that's really what the book is about.
Yeah.
Like you know how you enrich and provide value.
Yeah.
You're able to delight others.
Right.
G is for guide. You're
Right.
guiding the perceptions of others, and E, the final E, is for effort and hard work.
Right.
And we tend to think that effort and hard work comes first. That you put in the hard work and that everything will speak for itself.
Right.
But actually, effort and hard work comes last, because if you know how you enrich and how you delight and how you guide,
Yeah.
that's when your hard work works harder for you.
Interesting. And this is a typical complaint from people who feel there is, or who have experienced bias and feel that bias is holding them back, is that, listen, I have the skill and I've been putting in the effort, but I'm not getting the recognition. I'm not getting the reward for that effort.
Absolutely.
And part of it is guiding people through, as you're saying, hey, here is why I am hitting the targets that you need to see in order to get the reward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perspective on how you authentically can understand. Because sometimes people don't even, it's hard to really even understand what are your superpowers? What are the things that you're really good at? What are your weaknesses that you need to make sure aren't liabilities? So sometimes it's that piece of it. Sometimes it's being able to dynamically improvise when you're in situations so that you know how you delight. Sometimes it's being being accurate or being in tune with how people really see you and those perceptions so you can correctly guide them to who you are. So it's a variety of different things, but I think it's, it's called the edge quotient, where you can take this quiz and actually see, like, how equipped are you? Which of those categories are you sort of lacking, and which do you need to sort of work on, and how can you think about strategies to do that?
All right, when we get back from this final break, I want to know what the strategy is for, at the very least, getting credit for the ideas that you brought to the table and for your own execution in the workplace when we get back on This Week in Startups. If you're running a business like I am, and the 200 startups we've invested in are, you've probably got 30, 40, 50 projects going at any given point in time. But you, as the founder and CEO or a vice president, you may not know where all those projects are at, right? And how nice would it be to centralize all of those projects and feeds into one place so you can manage them effortlessly and increase accountability. Monday.com powers teams to run workflows, processes, and projects in one digital workspace, and it helps them unleash their potential to achieve results in all aspects of their work. Monday.com is an intuitive work operating system, a cloud-based software platform where teams plan, run, and, most importantly, track all of their work. Here is an example of how my associate Presh, the youngest associate in Silicon Valley, is using Monday to track the companies that we're considering for an accelerator. And you can see here, he's talking with them to see if they're a good fit for the accelerator. We've got so many companies in our inbox that Presh takes the companies in our Goldilocks zone and he organizes them into a beautiful Monday.com table. He also adds his notes in the comment section so the team can easily go and look at the recommended next steps. This has been an unlock for us as a team. As you might suspect, because we're using Monday.com, performance and accountability has gone up. You're going to get more done with less resources, and that's what it's about. That is the name of the game. And more than 100,000 companies around the world use Monday.com to free their teams to move faster and let them focus on the work that is required for their specific talent. So here is your call to action. I want you to start a 14-day trial and see how great this product is. And you can do that by going to monday.com/twist. That's Monday, as in the day of the week, monday.com/TWIST, which is the hashtag for This Week in Startups. Okay, thanks Monday.com for making great software and making us, including Associate Presh, even more efficient. Let's get back to this amazing episode. All right, welcome to This Week in Startups. My canceled guest, Laura Huang, is here with me, canceled Jason Calacanis, because we're talking about gender, race, bias, and just getting an edge. Turning adversity into an advantage is out right now. Go buy it. Again, if you're a fan of the pod, you need to buy whatever book. I know you guys all got a little chatter, and the book's well worth reading. It's a great read. Oh, great listen, actually. I'm halfway through it, listening to it.
You're not the whole way through listening to it?
Well, here's the thing.
You're canceled.
I know, I should be. I usually do get through the whole thing, but I got sick this weekend, and I got 3 kids, and 2 of them got sick.
Excuses. You need to be guiding my perceptions better to...
Well, as a single...
You're not single.
I'm just trying to pull a single parent card. I'm trying to pull a single parent card and I can't. As an outnumbered parent.
Okay.
3-2. But yeah, the audiobook, great. Thanks for sending me that in advance, by the way. I got the MP3s and I've been listening to them. So when we went to break, I want to know, I hear constantly, consistently might be a better word since we're focusing on words. I hear consistently from women that they don't feel they're getting recognition for the work they've done. And I'm constantly hearing from men how much they've done and how much they deserve a promotion and raise. It's like incessant. Men are like literally nonstop coming at me with, their high fives. And women, sometimes I hear from them that they don't feel they got credit. You have strategies around this? Is this a trend that you hear about a lot in your research?
I mean, this is sort of the I work twice as hard for half the rewards kind of thing.
True phenomenon.
And there is truth behind that.
Yeah.
But in that truth is also, what are you going to do about that? Right? It is what it is to some extent.
Right.
And so, what I talk about in the second half of the book is...
I actually started from the back.
Did you?
I did.
Yeah.
I always do.
Right. So you really liked chapter 13.
No, what I do is I always start with the last two chapters. It's my strategy for guests on the show. I start with the last two chapters.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they summarize what they've said in the book. Then I go back and listen to the entire book.
Huh, interesting.
So that I get to hear the end twice.
That's some good BSing, Jason.
It's the God's honest truth, actually.
Right.
If you ever want to do it on a book, your retention will go way up.
All right, interesting.
Because you've listened to the summary twice.
Yeah.
At the beginning and the end.
Okay.
And good authors will a lot of times sort of tell you up front, hey, here's what we're going to do in the book.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like that summary.
So the summary that you sort of read, which you were that you listened to, I talk about how a lot of, it's this, we are jaded and bitter in lots of ways, because when our hard work doesn't speak for itself, or when we put in the effort and the rewards go to somebody else, or that we keep hitting the same walls over and over and over again, we become jaded and bitter. Or, there's people who have wronged us, and we hold on to that. It's like a chip on our shoulder. I ask my students sometimes, think about a time when somebody wronged you, or some situation that still has you feeling angry. Within 10 seconds, people can recall 2 or 3 instances.
Really?
You can too. Come on.
Not too many. I'll kind of let them go, but I'm older in my career.
Well, and because you've read the last chapter of my book. And so
Twice.
So I talk about, how a lot of times we let it make us bitter. And instead of it, whenever something is starting to make us bitter, we need to be asking ourselves, how does this make us better, not bitter?
Got it.
And so when we think about making ourselves better and not bitter, then we understand that sort of negative, that failure, that those drawdowns, and what is it that we value? Why does it still bother us? Why is it still a chip on our shoulder?
What's the one you can tell me without telling the names and protecting the innocent? But you're in academia, so the stakes are so low that you must have had people try to screw you over many times.
Yeah, I know. I really will get canceled when I start talking about the times I've been screwed over in academia. No, loyalty is so big to me. Like, that's like
me too.
One of the,
it's my number one.
It's I feel like loyalty.
Hard work and loyalty are my two.
Well, hard work should come fourth after enriching, delighting, and guiding. Now that you know that, but no, loyalty and trustworthiness and sort of empathy. Like, those are my 3. I feel like you switch out any one of those and you become like a completely different sort of person. And I think the times that still sort of it's those situations where someone stabs you in the back and you're like, and especially when you value loyalty and trustworthiness, and you really like have somebody's best interests at heart, and then you realize that other people are those who, for just a tiny bit of personal gain, will step on lots of other people. Yeah. So I think it's those, and I think this is not unique to me. I think we all sort of have these experiences where we feel that this has happened, but you have to make it, how does this make you better and not bitter? How do you change that?
How do you?
And I think it's...
You didn't tell me yours, by the way. Nice deflect. I asked you yours.
I gave you the macro.
You didn't give me your example, but there's one. I can see it in your eyes. There's one that...
There's actually 2, but yeah.
Well, make a composite.
Yeah.
Composite it for me. The person's not going to listen to this. They're a narcissist. The last thing they're going to do is
it is true. They are
take the time to listen to you and your success now.
Yeah, no, they are a narcissist because they're, anyways. But
go ahead, tell us what happened, and then tell us how.
I feel like I'm on like the Ellen show or something.
Well,
and
it's not
Ellen
Oprah.
is
I don't want you to cry,
and
but
Ellen is trying to get me to secretly reveal like the gender of my. I'm not pregnant, but I'm feeling
gender reveal.
The gender reveal of my baby or something. So I've always dreamed of like being in a situation when somebody tries to like get information out of me on like a talk show. So this kind of feels like this.
Is it.
It's nice.
So tell us the composite of how you got this person and the narcissist who screwed you, and then how you let it not make you bitter. Go ahead.
Well, I think I'll start with the second piece first, and then we'll ease our way into the. I think the the not letting it. I mean, it's entrepreneurs do this all the time as well, right? You have to sort of ride the emotions while understanding those emotions, but not getting carried away by that. So what I mean by that, like entrepreneurs sometimes. You have these extreme highs and these extreme lows, and often they're all in the same day. And you have to be able to, I think one of the characteristics that makes a really good founder is being able to understand that there's going to be huge failures and huge successes and huge, really depressing days and really exhilarating days. And while you're understanding that, still being able to feel those emotions, while not getting carried away with it.
Consumed by them.
Yeah, you don't want to be consumed by them, but you want to understand them because there's so much data in those emotions. There's so much data in why does it feel so depressing? Why is it what is it that's really nagging at me? And understanding that sort of feeling. And I think
unpacking it, sitting with it, meditating on it,
and knowing what I talk about a lot, which is life rhymes. And we have situations in our life that have made us feel a certain way.
Yes.
And then a couple years later, it'll be a different context or a different situation, but we'll feel that same emotion or that same feeling, like something won't sit right. And there's so much information in that. That's how we build our experience and our mental models and our schemas and our intuition. That's how we sort of hone it by being able to.
Now give us yours, because then I'll give you mine. You give me
yours first, and then I'll give you mine.
I'm trying to get you to answer a question here. I'm the host, and you're constantly throwing it back at me.
You said you were going to give me yours too, so.
Well, I was going to give it to you as a reward for giving me yours first.
I need a little sweetener.
All right, okay, fine. I'll give it to you. So speaking of edge, I have always looked at when you are screwed, when people do come at you, and they do in business.
Yes.
And I long looked at business as war.
Yeah.
And there's really two types of confrontations when it comes to violence. There's quick and there's extended, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the samurai, and that's why Toshiro Mifune is on the wall over there, or the Jedi, which were modeled after the samurai, when they take that sword out and they use it, and if you ever see Yojimbo, there's a famous scene where Toshiro Mifune takes the sword out and he cuts a guy's arm off and it lays on the floor. And then they cut to the sword being put back on his belt and into the sheath and the blood being taken off of it. And it happens in seconds. And then it's over. As opposed to a barroom brawl, which goes on forever, or a war that goes on forever. And I think in my younger years, sometimes I went to war with people and it was never ending. Because it was not definitive. And what I've learned over time is I went to war with people over decades or a decade. Now, if I have to go to war with somebody, it's going to be either they're ignored and they're just ghosted forever, and I just give them zero attention. Or the possibility is, like the cantina scene in the original Star Wars where Obi-Wan takes out, and he says, listen, this young one is not worth your trouble. The guy says, well, I want to fight anyway, and he takes out the sword and cuts the guy's arm off. Remember that scene? Lucas took that from Kurosawa, and then that's why Kurosawa's book's on the wall here. It's one of my heroes. And by the way, that is a great book, something like a autobiography. He stole that, Lucas, from Kurosawa, from the Yojimbo scene. And you see the guy's arm fall on the ground.
Yeah.
And then the lightsaber's put away and turned off, just like the sword went away and it's turned off. And so now when somebody does something discriminating, happened recently, I just swung the sword, cut their arm off, put it away, and never shall that person's name or that person will never be in my life again. never will I take the sword out again because I cut their arm off already. They already learned their lesson.
But not everyone has that opportunity to cut someone else's arm off.
Oh, they do. You have to train with the sword. Just train.
Sounds almost like a Count of Monte Cristo sort of thing. Like you train and you train and you train, and then like, pow, there's like.
But didn't he stay in the jail for a long extended period of time and then got his revenge?
But he did his revenge. Like he unraveled it all at once.
You gotta be careful with revenge because it's a shallow victory afterwards. Like trust me, in Yojimbo or in Star Wars.
What prevents that other person from like retaliating?
They have one arm, and they want to keep it. I mean, I know
Talk about speaking in generalities. You're giving talking about
if somebody comes at you,
and
you show them that sword, and they experience what it feels like for that blade to hit, they very rarely would say, you know what? I'd like to be in front of that blade again. And in this case, it was just dropping the top legal firm in the world and a bunch of paper on somebody and saying, bink.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing.
Come back at me.
This is the thing about, not everyone. Frivolous lawsuits are everywhere.
This is not frivolous. This is just a letter.
Okay. But
this is a letter with, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. The legal system is supposed to be about justice and about truth and about all these sorts of things. Do you believe that it is?
I believe it's flawed, but the best one we got, so far in humanity. But it can work for the underdog more than the person who is the person with the big chip stack, but it could also work the other way. And so I was recently advising somebody who got screwed and didn't have a lot of power.
Yeah.
It is a valid observation you're making, which is I have resources now and I have the sword.
Yeah.
But when I didn't, somebody else was in a similar situation. I said, you know what you should do? You should write a blog post. And you should detail exactly how this investor screwed you. I said, and then you should say to them, as they've ousted you from your company, I disagree with what you've done, and I'm not going to sue you, but I'm going to write this blog post, and I'm going to publish it, and I'm going to give the story to the Wall Street Journal and Business Insider and anybody else who will listen, and I am going to tell every founder I'm going to put your name in the title, and every founder I'm going to put in the first sentence, email me anytime if you would like a reference for this individual.
Right.
I said, and then watch exactly how quickly, and that's a different type of sword.
And then that investor sues you for slander.
No.
Why not?
Because the investor knows that suing a founder is the worst possible recourse, and settling with the founder is the best possible recourse, because then they go, you're crazy and you don't care. And let me tell you something. There is one person you do not want to fight with, which is somebody who has nothing left to lose. And this is where having nothing left to lose is a very powerful thing. When you truly get screwed and got nothing, then the other person has to realize, well, you're backed into a corner, so you might as well fight your way out. There's a chance you might make it out. Mm-hmm. And the person then who has a lot at stake, who has the money and the power, says, do I want to risk everything I've spent 50 years building to have this blog post on the internet? And that person, I'm going to sue them, and they have nothing, and then they're just going to write more blog posts?
Yeah, it's so complicated.
You underestimate the power of
I just think
the public.
There's so much nuance there, right? There's the nuance behind the person with the resources who can continue, right? Whereas the other person can't continue because they don't have the resources for the lawyers and the legal. You underestimate that person who can then write his or her own blog post, even if it's complete lies, all of these sorts of things. I mean, I think
the VC would never do that. Because once they're faced with the possibility of other founders seeing them, mixing it up with a founder and not being able to control that relationship, they will just say, it's not worth dealing with that person. This actually happened online just over the last couple of days with a VC who's been tweeting crazy stuff. And a couple of people have bad stories about this person. I won't say their name on the show, but it just makes it very hard for that investor then, when they're having a conversation with a founder, to say, I'm not going to create radioactivity around your startup.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. It's the last thing you want. Tell us your story.
We're going to talk I mean, there's so many hints of what you said already.
Yeah.
I mean, when I feel like the bitterness comes when there's legal sort of things, and I mean, but that is, I'm going to get some of your advice offline about about these sort of things.
Well, here's the thing about bitterness. It's a lot of times if people feel there's no off-ramp, like they said with the Iran situation, give them an off-ramp.
Yeah.
If people feel powerless, they will try to take their power back.
Yeah.
And that could be very dangerous for you. So that's why I like the art of settling.
Yeah.
That's why it's kind of nice when you take the sword out and you're like, here's your sword, and I'm about to swing it. And then they're like, oh, no, you can put the sword away. Okay, great. Or you swing it, and it's like, you still got one arm left.
Assuming that other person is a rational, logical person. But anyways, clearly there's a lot of feelings and emotions that, see, this is what I said. Within 10 seconds, my students can bring up things that are decades long, year-long sort of bitterness and things that they can, I mean, we all have these sorts of things.
And you were about to tell us yours after I told you mine.
And so that was, I mean, it involved sort of that. I'll give you sort of a composite, but I had someone that I was mentoring and pretty much was helping this person along, doing all these sorts of things. And then that person basically scooped a paper that I had already started working on. Yeah. And so that's sort of the composite.
Wow. So the person scooped your idea for a great paper and ran with it.
Yes. And claimed sole ownership of it.
So that would be like you worked on the screenplay together and they're like, yeah, you don't get, when I win best screenplay.
This would be like you and I, we're Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. We wrote Good Will Hunting.
Right. Best picture. I get to go up and get it.
And
you
then,
don't.
Yes.
Oh, man. This happened to the person who wrote the screenplay writer of Pulp Fiction with Tarantino, got kind of marginalized in that process by Harvey Weinstein, and he's been vocal about it.
This happens often.
How did you deal with that bitterness? And what did you carry forward?
Well, there was lots of dimensions associated with that too.
Assume,
I mean, but I think were
you friends with the person?
Yes.
And friends no more?
No.
So this person cared more about that paper than the friendship with you.
Yes.
How does that make you feel?
Wow, this is feeling really like talk showy.
Well, you said you wanted it, so I'm giving you your moment. You're like, I always dreamed of it.
I want my moment.
We're making dreams come true here, Laura.
I want my moment with Oprah and Ellen. I feel like, I mean...
Oh, what? I can't have empathy here and have a moment with you?
Oprah and Ellen would probably have read my whole book before.
That's fair.
So...
Fair point. I'm working my way through it. You have no idea what's on my plate. But seriously, like, that's got to be a gut punch.
Oh, it's devastating. It's devastating. So, But I mean, that is, there's an element of that I think that we all have. And so like, that is sort of the adversity. We have to flip that adversity into our advantage.
So you were bitter. How has it made
I'm not bitter anymore. I'm better now. Yeah.
How did you convert that bitterness into betterness?
I think it sounds so funny, but there's some people that you can't ever negotiate with. I think like someone once said that, gosh, I really don't want to now I'm saying, but they're a friend of mine who was in the military. He was like, you just don't negotiate with Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to really, you don't. Yeah. So you just kind of, it is what it is.
You have to isolate them
you isolate them and you go on with your life and you sort of do your thing. And that's really what it is.
Yeah. What I tell people is, I had somebody, I had loaned some money to, very small amount. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, I'll write you a check back. Mm-hmm. That's when I was in my 20s. They write me a check back for the $50 I loaned them. Check bounced. Mm-hmm. I got charged $15. Because I guess you get, if you put in a check that bounces, I got charged. I was like, what the heck is this? Now this is costing me $15 more than the $50. Uh-huh. And I was upset about it. And my brother said to me, that's the best $50 you ever spent.
Yeah.
You never have to talk to that person again. They are going to avoid you forever. Because they don't want to see you, because they don't want to give you the $50 back. Right. And therefore, you paid $50 to eliminate that person from your life.
Right.
And that's how I felt about, my breakup with Mike Arrington was very famous. And that was one where I just didn't take the sword out. I got into a wrestling match and we were in a mud pit. And a friend of mine was like, you guys are in a mud pit, and like when you're in a mud pit like that, like the pig likes it.
Yeah.
And nobody knows who the other person is. I'm not saying Mike Arrington's a pig.
No.
I'm just saying,
I'm just
in that situation, he did enjoy being in a wrestling match with me. Like, it was like something he clearly enjoyed. And cutting that person out then led to me doing launch.
Yeah.
And the funds.
Yeah.
And the Uber investment and all this other stuff. So literally getting Mike Arrington out of my life was like cutting off like 100-pound anchor.
I'm just chuckling because a friend of mine actually gave the same analogy. She just used it a different context.
Yeah,
She basically said pretty people shouldn't get into bar fights.
That's the way I feel. I look in the mirror and I'm like, you want this face to get in a bar fight?
That is like you have nothing left to lose. Like right? People who are, you shouldn't be getting.
No, the guy who's got like a scar in his face
that's
is
right.
like, yeah, let's go. Let's have a knife fight.
That person who's going, right, they don't care, but pretty people shouldn't get into bar fights.
Yeah, it is a nice way of saying, what is your hope for people reading the book and what they ultimately come away with? If somebody walks up to you in the street 2, 3, 4, 10 years from now and says, hey, I read Edge. Here's what it did for me.
Yeah.
What would be the most meaningful thing for them to say to you?
Yeah, I mean, I have gotten so many really thoughtful notes already that have been so meaningful. And I think, these notes and this is who I was actually writing. As I was writing the book, I was thinking of these people who are aspirational and believe in themselves, but other people haven't for whatever reason. And so it's really this message of, you can empower yourself. You can flip all of this. You can flip obstacles and stereotypes and challenges. Flip that in your favor. And when you're able to flip that in your favor, that's when you can create your own edge.
Yeah. And this book is not just for women or people of color. This is intended for anybody who feels that they're being marginalized and who wants to get an edge, correct?
Absolutely. It's both those people who are trying to succeed and trying to get somewhere but feel like they can't. I also, as I was writing it, there was a number of instances where I found that, parents, for whatever reason, will ask professors for parenting advice because they think that, I don't know, whatever.
Well, you're a professor.
Well, And so they would
might be able to teach them something.
And I was realizing as they were sort of asking is that, parents are fighting so hard to try and give their kids an advantage.
Yeah,
right?
You want to talk about an edge.
Yeah, I mean, they're fighting so hard. We see instances where parents are like illegally buying their kids SAT scores and trying to get them, buy them into colleges, but on a more benign, in a more legal way, like private coaches, extra tutoring, extracurriculars. But instead of fighting so hard to give your kids an edge, which might just be one-dimensional, instead teach them how to create their own edge. Teach them how to create their own edge so that they know how to go into a situation and how they enrich and how they can delight and how they can guide those perceptions of others. So they have that advantage in every context.
Today, almost every skill you want to learn is available on YouTube or online or on Coursera or edX or MIT courseware.
Or at Harvard Business School.
Harvard Business School has, are all the courses online?
Well, HBX, so there's an online.
And all the courseware is free. You only pay to get the paper, is my understanding for these things. If all of the courseware in the world is out there, and then all the prerequisites are on Brilliant.org, which we're investors in, or Khan Academy, those places, how do you account for motivation and the fact that so many people who don't feel they can get an edge are spending 5 hours a day watching television and just not motivated to add skills or educate themselves when all of this free education is out there? I was looking at MIT courseware recently and I was watching these videos. I'm like, these videos on YouTube are like the huge unlock to getting a job anywhere in tech, like machine learning course, right?
Yep.
And they have 300,000 views. And I'm just like, and then some idiotic YouTubers got, 100 million views for a video, 1 billion views. How do you account for motivation and the fact that so many people want to complain about the system being broken? They don't have an edge. The system's, stopping them, yet they don't want to go get these skills which are freely available online.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that everyone can learn it. Everyone can learn this. Everyone can learn to create their own edge, but not everyone is willing to. And that willingness comes from a lot of different factors. I mean, one factor is that you have to be willing to be okay with failure and embarrassment. You're going to embarrass yourself. And when you embarrass yourself, most people sort of say, oh, like, never again. I'm never going to put myself in that situation again. But that's actually the situation in which you should be doubling down. You double down and because, I mean, we don't learn as much as we'd like to say, like, make that mistake once and then you'll never make it again. I don't know. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 times making the same mistake before I really get it. And so you have to be willing to have that humility and that failure and that embarrassment to sort of learn this. I mean, I think the other piece of it is that, you know, there's so much information out there. There's almost now too much. And so we assume that we have everything at our disposal. But really, in order to grow, you have to prune. Yeah. And companies have to do this. People have to do this. You have to go back to, like, what are the basics? What are your basic goods? What are your basic things that really make you? And companies, as they grow and scale, they lose out on this all the time. They start adding features. They start adding, you know, different segments, all these things. But go back to what you're good at. If you are
essentialism.
If you are an Italian restaurant and your thing is like homemade pasta.
Yeah, get it right.
Yeah, make sure that stays right, even as you grow and expand your menu and do all these other things.
I was explaining this to somebody. We were eating in a Japanese restaurant, a ramen place, and they were my favorite ramen place in San Mateo, and they were like, they don't have like tempura. And I was just like, you have not been to Japan, right? They're like, no. I'm like, if you said this in Japan, they would say, you're in a ramen restaurant. If you want tempura, the restaurant 2 doors down is a tempura restaurant. Right. And in Japan, it's like the katsu restaurant is the katsu restaurant, and the Kobe beef and the sushi place. Like, and in America, with this weird perception that, like, you go to a Japanese restaurant and they're like, there's the katsu and there's your sushi and there's your ramen and there's your tempura. It's like, there's no thought of, like, which one are they excellent at? And you cannot be excellent at all 4 or 5 things.
That's right.
Pick one and be excellent and deeply excellent. This is because I get this advice too. Like, hey, talk to my kid, or what should I tell my kid? And I'm like, the ability to learn skills quickly is the unlock. Like, if you can add a skill in a very short period of time, it is so impressive to employers and so effective when running a startup. And I was just having a meeting before we got on air with a founder who just was a hardware founder who taught himself all the sales and marketing stuff.
Yeah.
And is doing much better than, you know, the VP of sales, like this chief revenue officer that would cost $300,000 or $400,000, because they just took this 3 to 6 months to learn everything about sales and marketing and the whole funnel. This is the unlock, is just being able to learn these skills quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's so critical because you can't be excellent at 6 things at once.
No.
And so that's the sort of, you have to prune in order to grow. As you're growing and trying to get bigger, keep going back to what are the 1 or 2 things that you're really, really good at. Keep building from there, just like a tree, right?
Yeah.
If the tree wants to grow, you got to prune away the extra stuff so that you can grow.
You can't have like 50 limbs that are all the big thick ones that, you know, it's like, maybe there's 3 or something.
Right.
All right, listen. Continued success. You got to go. You got more press to do on your book tour. Congratulations. And the book tour is going well?
It is. It is. It's like a little overwhelming, but it's also, I mean, you know, when I do research, it's like statistics and findings and stuff. This is like, there's stories in there about me and people I know, and it's so vulnerable in a way. So it's also sort of exhausting and terrifying that people are reading these things
I love the Elon Musk story. I was tempted. We're friends, and so I was tempted to send the MP3 file to him where you talk about him, and I was like, I can't do that because the publisher sent me these, and you know, I don't want to have MP3s floating. I don't know if it's a final one or whatever.
I'm sure he's heard.
But I won't say the Elon Musk story. I'll save it for the readers. And then my big unlock for you with the book, Getting an Edge. I created Angel.University with Mike Savino and Jackie here on the staff. And we did that course 15 times since the book came out. And it was my way to meet 50 people, 60 people who read the book and then teach them to go more in depth. What you have here is the beginning of an Edge course where you could do Getting an Edge live and just charge people $300, include lunch or dinner, and really get to know like the people who've read the book and create like the next level where they can work with each other and meet people around the book, because books are about community today. It's not just the information in the book, I find. And this was a huge unlock for me, because I had maybe 1,000 people come to live events like the ones that I'm talking about, Angel University, I did dim sum Q&As, which worked really well. So are you doing any kind of live, like 50 people, 25 person events? That are interactive, they can ask questions and hang out with you?
Some are sort of, these Q&A kind of things, but that's a great suggestion. I need to figure out how to
make
do
a PowerPoint and walk people through a course. That's what we did. And it is so powerful to meet the readers and answer their questions. And then you figure out what you left out of the book.
Yeah, that's great. Great
Edge
suggestion.
the course.
Thank you.
It'd be so great. All right, everybody go buy the book, Laura Huang. It is Edge. Do you have a website for the book, or just type in Edge?
LauraHuang.net.
There it is, Huang. And we'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.